Hey guys, if you're looking to streamline your employee offboarding events in your organization, stay tuned because in this video, I'm gonna show you a unique integration between Microsoft Forms and Power Automate that you can leverage to actually automate the entire employee offboarding experience. This is going to include everything from more of our time-sensitive security-related tasks, such as blocking the user sign-in or revoking their sessions, and then into more of the time-consuming repetitive tasks that we usually perform as part of an SOP, like converting their mailbox to shared, removing the license, providing access to the mailbox to another user, removing them from groups, everything like that. So stay tuned, we have a lot to unpack there. I'm gonna be showing you the full tutorial and actually providing you a free template that you can use and upload into Power Automate to customize as your own. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Nick. I'm a Microsoft MVP and I've been creating content here in the channel for the better half of a decade. If you haven't already, definitely subscribe to the channel to see more content around Microsoft and the MSP space. Otherwise, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay guys, so getting into it here, we're gonna go through what the automation is going to perform, and then I'm gonna be showing you all the steps here. So fundamentally, we're using a Microsoft form to have something that a user can submit within the organization. We're gonna go ahead and get that user. We're gonna understand based off the form entry if it's an immediate termination or not. If it's not an immediate termination, we're gonna wait until that timestamp to occur and delay the flow until then. But afterwards, or if it's immediate, we're gonna go ahead and block their sign-in. We're gonna revoke all their sessions from a security standpoint. And then we're actually gonna be using an Azure automation. This is another cool part of the video that I'll share with you today, which is sharing how you can connect to PowerShell. And specifically in this case, we're using Exchange online commandlets to be able to convert the mailbox to shared, and then do these other things such as set up automatic replies, providing mailbox access to another user, and then hiding that user from the GAL. From there, we're going to be removing their license via group membership and removing them from the rest of the groups that they're part of. And we're going to be sending a ticket to IT with all this information. So really, it's just an email connector to your PSA tool to be able to facilitate the follow-up of everything that was done and just have some tracking behind this. Real quick guys, a short break for our sponsor CloudCapsule here, which is an application that I built to help you monitor your security within your Microsoft 365 tenant that is mapped to the CIS controls. This is something that you could leverage to perform security audits across your customers or your individual Microsoft 365 tenants, map it to CIS, and begin to have steps in mind to go perform a compliance uplift within these customer environments, as well as derive certain project revenue from them as well too. So if you haven't already, definitely check it out. You go to cloudcapsule.io and run a free assessment today to see what it's all about. So if we get into prerequisites here, the first thing that you'll want to do is create a service account that we're going to use for the automation flow. Generally speaking, I create something like automations@thedomain.com. This is something that you got to use because it's great to have automatic logging against this account for just security and compliance purposes. But also, if a regular user ever leaves, it would break our automation flow. So we want to make sure we have dedicated connections for what we're going to be doing within there. From a licensing perspective, you would need a Power Automate Premium license to be able to use this connector, which is allowing us to tap into PowerShell via an Azure automation account. And we'll see how to set that up as well too. Subsequently, this does require a Azure subscription, and I'm going to walk you through the steps of actually setting up the account here for the Azure automation, but prerequisite would be having just a subscription in general. Cost behind this is really minimal. It's nominal. It's a couple dollars a month for setting this up, versus the Power Automate Premium license, which is $20 a user a month. But I think it's worth it given if you use that account for both user onboard automation, which I provided a video for before, as well as this offboard automation. We are going to be removing the license via group membership. Within the groups here, if you look at your active groups for this, you can create something like Microsoft 365 Business Premium users or something like that as a test. I showed this in my automation video around onboarding, but after you're done with that, within the licensing section here, you could always choose the available subscription that you have, and it has to have obviously available seats within here. And if I look at one here, you can assign the licenses, and specifically they have one for groups here. You can enter the group name to add them in there. And you'll see as we work through the automation, we're going to be removing the user from this group, which will subsequently remove the license. If you wanted to do that with a direct license removal, you would have to use kind of this Azure automation account and perform that via PowerShell today. But that's an alternative to what we're going to be doing here. Lastly, here on the send ticket to IT or sending it to your PSA, it's an email connector. I like to send this out from a shared mailbox within the tenant just because it gives us some dedicated email to use without having to license our automation account with an email subscription. And we can name it as a naming convention, like something like support@thedomain.com. So in this particular case, if I click into this one, if I go into the members here, this is also where you would add your automation service account as a member so that you'll be able to use them within the Power Automate flow. So within Microsoft Forms, obviously you can customize this flow as you see fit for the organization. I'm just going to be providing a basic form here that somebody in the organization could fill out. This isn't going to be a tutorial on Microsoft Forms. It's not that complicated, in my opinion, just to set up a form. But some of the things here you can do is set restrictions on the form fields, make them required. And restrictions would be saying that, this is an email. So we have some basic pattern matching we can leverage for form entries so that the user's not fat fingering something in incorrectly. That would make the automation fail. But then the other things that we're doing here, just saying, are we going to terminate immediately, which you're going to use in our automation flow to perform certain actions, termination date, providing mailbox to another user, and then the email to provide access for. So pretty basic here. Again, you could customize this as you see fit. But the main thing after you're done here, also, when you click on this collect responses button, you can say only people in your tenant can respond and then specific people. I'd recommend doing this and adding in a group or a couple of users in here that would be able to submit this form, because if you think about it, we don't want just anybody being able to come in and start blowing away users. As an example, for the people that are filling out this form, they should be approved from an HR standpoint. Okay, so the next prerequisite step here is actually creating our Azure automation account. This is again where we're going to be creating some PowerShell scripts and PowerShell runbook that is going to be leveraged within our Power Automate flow. So if you haven't already, you'll have to have an Azure subscription. I'm not going to walk through that. I'll assume you already know how to do that, and I'll link that in my blog post if you don't. But effectively here, you'll want to search for Azure automation accounts, specifically just automation accounts. I've got one in here already for user offboarding, but I'm going to create a new one just so we can see this all the way end to end. You can add this into a new resource group, or you can create a new one. You can call this user offboard for purposes of this demo. And then for the account name, the Azure Mediation account, I'm going to call it Employee Lifecycle, and I'll keep it here in East US. Go ahead and create this. After this deploys, you can click on Go to Resource here. And from here, what we need to do is we need to load in some of the packages that we're going to be leveraging as far as the modules go for Exchange. And subsequently, just as an FYI, you could do this across other modules like Teams or even Graph. So what I'm going to look for here is Exchange. And I do not have the list of modules here, so I'm going to add a module. And we're going to click on Browse from Gallery. We're going to choose from our gallery here, and we're going to search for Exchange. And I just want to show you guys this because you'll have to download and install some prerequisites, but you click on Exchange Online Management. This is more of the newer module that we get. This is where we can connect to Exchange Online. And the runtime version that we'll want to select here is going to be 5.1. And you'll notice down below here, we get these dependencies that we need to install, which is package management and then PowerShell get. So what we need to do is install these one by one, just so that the dependencies are there. So I'm going to go ahead and change this. I'm going to click on Cancel, click on Add Module, browse from Gallery, search for Package Management, click on this, and we're going to select this here. And I will select 5.1 as the version that I want here. Each one of these will take just a few minutes to install. You'll be able to search for them, and you'll see that it's in this importing status, and you'll be able to refresh to see when it's done. I'd recommend just waiting till it's done and then going on to the next one. Okay, so I'm back here. I'm adding another one. I'm adding PowerShell Get, and I will select this, and I will select 5.1, click on Import. All right, and we're back again here. PowerShell gets installed, so now we'll go back and add that Exchange one again here, and we will select this. and use 5.1. No error messages this time about dependencies. So we'll let that load. One of the other things that it's done here is it's created what's known as a managed identity for this. And we have our service principal ID here, which is something that we're going to need to use and associate to a specific permission within our tenant. So if you're within your portal, you can go into the Entra Admin Center, and I will sign in here. If you go into applications and enterprise applications, you can search based off this object ID, and you'll notice in here it's got our service principal. And what we're looking specifically to do here to grant this thing permissions is, number one, on your permissions here, we're looking to add the Exchange Manage As permission so that we can have enough rights to be able to call the Azure permissions using this system managed identity. And so fundamentally, this is an article I will link in my blog, if I can pull it over here, that gets into all these steps that I'm basically going through with you right now. I'm just going to do the Cliff Notes version of this. So we're going to open up PowerShell, run as administrator. I'm going to go ahead and connect to Graph. And I'm already connected here, but you'll be asked to sign in with the global admin credentials in the tenant to be able to set this up. We'll go ahead and copy this next line, which is really just seeing if we can grab this application, which is the Exchange Online application that we want to use as far as our role. And we're going to get an app role assignment from there to provide for consent. So this is the role ID for the Exchange Manage As permission. The resource ID is Exchange Online. This is what that's saying basically. And then this last line, we're getting and setting it against the service principal. So this MID we need to set. So we're going to set this, put this in single quotes. We'll go back to Entra. And we will go, in this case, back to Overview. Grab the Object ID. Set that. So that's the Object ID for our service principal. And then we will copy this script because it's getting everything else that we need from what we're going to set above. And we'll just run this. And that is set that. So if we go back to our permissions here, refresh, this might just take a second. There we go. Exchange Manage As app has been added for us, which is what we need from a permission standpoint. And then the last permission we need to add is going under our roles. So roles and admins. And again, this is all within that support article that I'll link in my blog post, just to be clear. We're going to look for Exchange here. I'm going to add it to the Exchange Administrator role. We're going to add an assignment. And we're going to add in our service principal. So you'll search for that service principal name. So we called it Employee Onboarding Lifecycle, Employee Lifecycle. And then we'll click on Select here. We can enter justification. Just going to say use for employee offboarding and Power Automate. Click on Assign here. Great. So now if I refresh here, we've got employee lifecycle. That's everything we needed there. So if we go back to our runbooks, we just make sure here that we've got our module now installed. Change Online Management. We'll go into runbooks here, and we're going to create a runbook. Runbook name we're going to use as user offboarding. And the runbook type is PowerShell. Runtime version is 5.1. And we'll go ahead and create this. All right, after that's done here, we're going to use this commandlet section here. And because it's PowerShell, we already have this preloaded in. I'll provide this script. It's really too much to just type out with you for this. But some highlights here. The parameters that we're setting here is what we're going to be dynamically entering within our Power Automate flow. So you'll see that more when we get into that. We're connecting to Exchange Online here, and we're going ahead and setting the organization here to be t-365com.onmicrosoft.com. This is the default domain that was established whenever I spun up the tenant. You can find that here if you go into the admin portal, and under the admin portal, if you click on show all settings, domains, we've got it right here, right? So this is the one that got spun up when we established the tenant. That's the one that you'll want to add to connect within this. And all this is doing is setting the mailbox we defined to shared. It's setting the user to be hidden from the gal. And then if we associated a user to have visibility or have rights into the mailbox, we'll assign them here. And then we're going to disconnect from Exchange Online. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm going to publish it. Normally you would test it here first, but I've already run this, so I know that. If we run into any errors, so I'll be sure to show you them. Part of this demo is going to be me being kind of live with creation, so you can see any errors and maybe get some more learning from that. The other thing that we want to do here is we want to create one more runbook, and we want to call this remove user from distribution list. This is another one we can't do natively within Power Automate. We're using PowerShell to do that. Same settings here. Runbook type is PowerShell, and the version is 5.1. All right, and this one here, again, going to give you guys this in the chat. Same thing here, we're taking in a couple parameters, the identity, and this is of the distribution list, and then the member that we're going to remove, which is going to be the user that we're offboarding. Simple script just to remove them there, and then we're going to disconnect. So we'll save and publish this. All right, and that's everything we needed to do for the Azure automation. So now if we go back into Power Automate, we'll begin to start to create this automation flow. So again, I'll be giving you guys a template that you can just upload, but I wanted to take you through end to end as a full tutorial to show you all the steps. You might get some good Power Automate learning from this as well that you're going to walk through, but I'm going to start a new flow from an automated cloud flow, and we're going to call this user offboard template. So I'll just be able to export it to you guys. You can search for this trigger, but we're going to say when a new response is submitted, click on create. And here we're going to be going ahead and grabbing the form we have for user termination. You'll be able to dynamically grab that here. You'll search for the forms connector, and we're going to click on get response details. For those of you not familiar with Power Automate, it allows you to chain these events. You know, if you're familiar with a Zapier or something like that, very similar tool. And then we can dynamically add values. So in here, we're going to include the response ID from this user termination form as part of that. And then what we're going to do is also use an Entra connector here. And we're going to go ahead and use an action to get a user. And the unique user ID or principal name we're going to use that is coming from our response details. You could do this multiple ways, right? You could have asked for the UPN if it is different in your organization than the email. Just want to call that out. I recognize that as we're walking through this. But then here we also, as you remember, if you recall, in our termination form, we have this question about, is this an immediate termination or not? So we really want to set up a conditional statement to be able to go ahead and dictate whether or not they applied that. So we're going to say condition. We're going to use the value of terminate immediately. And if it's equal to yes, if that evaluates to a truthy value, we'll go do these things. If it doesn't, we're going to do these falsy things, which is really delaying the next actions that do occur. So in order to not duplicate kind of the same actions on both ends, right, from the standpoint of I wait over here and then I do the same things as I would over here, we're just going to add one action under the false section, which is going to be a delay. And we're going to say delay until, and we're going to get a function within here. Actually, this is going to be an expression we use. This is going to be convert to UTC, and we're going to dynamically grab, in this case, the termination date as part of that. And then you'll notice here it wants you to put in the time zone. So it gives you this link here that you can use to go ahead and search for the time zone that you're in for the format. So in my case, I'm going to look for Mountain Time, and this is the input that I want to add for this. If we scroll all the way up, see that it's the time zone here, and then time zone description. So the time zone text is what you want to grab here, and then we are just putting that into a single quote and then clicking on add at the bottom. So now we have our expression here, so we're just delaying, and we're going to rename this actually to terminate immediately. And the other thing I want to do here is if for some reason we can't get this user, whether or not they had a fat typo or something like that, we want to have some fault tolerance. So I want to add an action here, and I want an email to go out to our help desk if this failed, so they understand that we couldn't find whatever the user inputted. There's a number of ways you could handle, how this gets done from the standpoint of what's done next. But if we look into our connectors here, we can look into all of these, and there's going to be one in here to send an email from a shared mailbox. And in the originator's mailbox, original mailbox here, this is where you want to use that shared mailbox that we created earlier. In my case, it's support. In this case, I'm just going to add a fixed value today, but this would be kind of your ticketing system. Then you can add your subject line here, and then you could add a dynamic value maybe of the user's email and add some body text here. Really, I'm not going to go through that for the sake of time because it's customizable. And what you could do, if you're an MSP, you might want to put in, the customer name here as well. If this is going to your ticketing system, just as an indicator, just to give an example of that. But the other things that we're doing here is we have this run of after type of value. We're saying right today, it's saying if this is successful, we don't want to be, if it's successful, we want to say is skipped, is failed, or has timed out as part of that. And actually we want to add this other one here as just kind of a branched effort to this event. We don't want this to run sequentially. So what we're going to do for this guy is we're actually going to go back to settings, and we're going to look for get user, and we're going to remove this guy as the action. So as you can see here, it's just forking out if this failed, and it's going to try to flow through into this action. So basics there, of what we'd want to do. But then after this is done, this is where we really want to start adding and chaining our next events. So this is also where we can use the Entra connector again here. And in this case, we're going to revoke the user session, which is called this refresh tokens. It's not a great name here, but it makes sense once you get into the details of it. We're going to get the ID from the get user request that we had there, and we're just going to say revoke sessions, just like to rename this guy. From there, we're going to add an action. To go to Entra. We are going to update a user. This one is going to be called block sign in. Here we are going to go ahead and put in the ID of the user. And then for the advanced parameters, we're going to go to this account enabled one and add it. And then we're going to say no for this value. So we're setting them to disabled. The other thing I recommend here is to periodically save your progress, just because if you don't and you move off the page, you will get it all blown away, which is not fun for anybody. So next action we're going to do here is search for our Azure automation. And it's going to be this one right here. This is the premium connector again, right? We see this premium, and this is why you need the premium license of Power Automate to be able to run this. We're going to call this Exchange Offboarding. You can call it whatever you like here. But for the subscription, you'll have to be tied into account. Again, the service account, if you created one, has to have some type of contributor reader access into your Azure subscription as a call out. Just if you don't see this, that's generally what it's going to be. We have our user offboard resource group we created here. And we have the Azure automation account name dropping down here. This is going to be employee lifecycle. And then when we load that up, we should get this error here. It took a second there, but the other thing that we wanted is the runbook name as part of that. So the runbook name is going to dynamically load again from what we created. We want user offboarding. Wait for job. We don't need to wait for the job in this particular sense. What you'll notice also though, after we loaded this runbook, is we get 2 more advanced parameters. And these are the parameters we specified within the PowerShell script that's within the runbook. So within the bodies parameters user here, the user is going to be anybody we specify to get access to this other user. So what we want here is type the user's email to provide access. That's who we want there. And for the identity that we want here, we want to go ahead and add this user email to this, because this is the identity of the user that we're offboarding as part of that. So that looks good there for that script. And then subsequent here, we're going to go ahead and add an action, and we're going to start to get rid of all the groups for the user. So we're going to find this action here that says get groups for the user. We're going to get the ID of the user that we want. We're going to get more than just security enabled. And then because of Microsoft's group system, we have to do a few kind of nested loops because of dynamic groups versus security groups versus distribution list. And or M365 groups, is part of that list as well too. But within here, we're going to go ahead and use a control. It's going to be an apply to each statement. And really we want to get the body of this value. So we want to get all the values here that came out from getting the groups of the user. So I'm going to rename this to loop through groups. And then we're going to add an action here. We're going to use Entra again. We're going to get the individual group that we're looping through at this moment in time. So within here, you can use current item, which is like the iteration that we're going through there to get the ID of the group to pass through to get more of the group attributes. And then we're going to use a conditional statement here. We are going to say check dynamic group. And this next part is just some syntax that I had to kind of troubleshoot to go through, as far as what this would look like, because otherwise, if you look at adding in a dynamic value here, what we're looking for is actually a group type as part of this, and that's not part of the native syntax. So you really want to be able to leverage something here, and this is just some basic syntax. So we're basically saying, get me the outputs of this get group. And then within the body, I want to actually get the group type. So this is a way to go beyond what's dynamically populated outside of that. And then within here, we're looking for the value here to equal dynamic membership. And that this is, again, just me understanding and working with this API for a while to understand what's part of that object. But if it is a dynamic group, we don't want to do anything, because we should have set up our dynamic groups to have users fall out if they are not enabled as an attribute rule or syntax part of that as well. The next thing we need to do is check if it's a distribution group or not, or distribution list. So we're going to say check distribution list. And within this syntax, we're looking for a couple of different fields here. First indicator we're looking for is just to see if there is no group types, because that's an indicator that this does not equal a distribution list. So we're just saying that the length of this, as in the object itself, is equal to 0. And then we're using a new item. We're adding a row here, and we're looking for the security enabled is equal to false, because those are both indicators that this is actually combined in the sense of seeing that it is a distribution list. And so if it is a distribution list, we want to be able to leverage our Azure Automation account. I'm going to create this job. I hate when it does that. We're going to go ahead and try again here. All right, create job. Same thing here. We're going to select our Azure subscription. We're going to select our resource group. We're going to select our Azure automation account, employee lifecycle. We're going to set up our runbook name. Runbook name here is distribution, remove user from distribution list. And then we get our parameters that come through here. So within here, we need to set the identity and then the member. So the identity first is going to be back on our get group here. We're going to get the display name. And our member here is going to come from our get user that we used earlier in this mail attribute. We're going to rename this to remove from distribution list. And then on the opposite side, if it's not a distribution list, it's not a dynamic group, then it's just a regular group. So we're just going to use the native Entra connector here for that. And we are going to use remove member from group. The group ID is going to be the ID that we get from this existing object, and the member ID is going to be the ID of the get user call. So in this way, we're looping through all the groups and we're just stripping the user from all of them. Subsequently, again, if you have the license assignment to a group, this is also where the license would be stripped from the user. After this is done, we're going to go ahead and add our final step here, which is just to send an email to our ticketing system with the email connector. We're still going to do that from the shared mailbox. Call this send ticket. We're going to find our shared mailbox that we created. We're going to put in, you would put in your email connector here. And then you can say user termination. And this is again where you can really customize the template. So maybe you want to add, there's additional data that you want to put in here as part of that. I'm just going to put in the user termination here, and then you could specify uniquely all of the details. And you could really templatize this as you see fit. I'm just going to provide a couple of examples here of what was done. But you can imagine, you can obviously customize this again as you see fit here with all of the unique details about what was done and any additional information for your offboarding SOP. So now if we save this here, we're going to go ahead and test this out. We can test it out by submitting a form, but before we do, I just quickly wanted to show you, we're going to offboard this user Rick Ross within the account. If we take a look at Rick and we look at his properties, it is, if we take a look at the account enabled, he is set at a yes today. He's got some groups that he's part of here, including our BP user group, which is giving him a license for Business Premium. This is how we're going to subsequently strip the license after he's done. And from here, we're also going to be converting him to a shared mailbox. So we'll be able to see that end to end. In the Power Automate flow, you can test this. And we're going to choose a manual trigger. After we do that, we can click on test, and it's going to wait for us to go ahead and submit the termination form. So if we pop over into our termination form, we're going to go ahead and say collect responses. So I can just copy, let's change this here too. I'm going to shorten this and copy this so that we can grab the link to test with. Go ahead and paste this in here. We're going to say this is Rick Ross. We're going to put Rick Ross a T minus. We're going to say terminate immediately. It's today. Provide access to a mailbox to another user. We're going to say yes. And we're going to choose me to provide access here for this capability. And then we're going to go ahead and click on submit. If we go back to our flow here, we've got a network error, which is not good. So if we go back here, we've got this in a failed status, so let's go ahead and see what happened. So we got this value here got a couple of things that we need to pay attention to. One of which is we have this failed and it's got Mountain Standard Time not valid. And then we also got this input here for status of failed. What expression result was false. I thought we put in true for this. Let's just see. Terminate immediately was yes. Let's take a look at our logic here. That still looks good. Let's go ahead and grab this, look at what's going on here. Looks like this might be just a spacing issue, one of those annoying ones. Let's go ahead and save. This again, after this saves here, we'll be able to click back in. This again should equal yes, given what we did. So let's just go back. Let's click on this. We were able to get the user, we got the response details. We were able to get this. This was evaluated to yes. So it should have been truthy. It's the only thing that is confusing here. Let's take a look back at our form, see if we're missing anything. We've got this to yes. So let's go ahead and resubmit. Still captured, even though, because we put today's date, so it still processed everything. But I'm still curious as why we are getting a falsy value here. Okay, I'm back after troubleshooting that for a minute. Looks like it was just a UI bug because we're evaluating true now on this statement, and we have everything else kind of loop through and perform checks. This one looped through all the way. We didn't remove any users because we had already done that. So if I go back to Rick Ross here in the portal, he's not a member of any groups anymore, so that means we remove the license from him as well. If we go into the properties, we will see that account enabled is no. If we pivot over into shared mailboxes, we'll see that Rick is here now, and you'll notice under the manage mailbox permissions, we've gotten the full rights here with the user that we added. So that was all part of that piece. From our email connector, we've got this going out from our shared mailbox there for the details of the user that was offboarded. We've got the user termination and then the user email there as well. So all that flowed through just fine. And it looks like everything is set now. So we've got all of this looking really good. Finally, here guys, just on the upload, again, you'll be able to download this template from the blog post that I link in this video description. From there, you'll click into My Flows, import package legacy. Here, you're going to be able to upload the zip package. After that's uploaded, you'll see this page here. What you want to do is leave this as create as new, and then you're going to create your connections here with Microsoft Forms, Microsoft Entra, and Outlook. Recall that this is going to be the service account that has access into the support shared mailbox. In my example, if you use Entra for the connection here, you're going to need to assign the service account either the user administrator, group administrator roles or group writer roles, just so they're able to perform the actions that we saw there for removing users from groups and all of that. And then the Microsoft Forms connection, again, you'll need the account to have access to Microsoft Forms. In order to do that, you can click on this button here. You can click on the resource you want to use, or you can click on create new and create a connection for each one of these, and then click on save and import. After you import the flow, you'll want to go through each of these actions and just make sure everything looks good. Some of these specifically need to go in and be updated with the form in your environment. Just put some placeholders in here so I could export it as a template for you. So you need to remove things like this response ID and add the actual form. Make sure that these values are populating correctly based off of your form values.
And then the other thing that I did here that you'll notice is I removed the Azure automation. So you'll need to just add that back in there. And again, you can search for Azure automation to do that. And this is specifically because it'll give me errors if I try to export it into a template. So just remember we're using that create job action both for that flow piece there, and then also here for removing the member from the distribution list. And obviously you can customize this as you guys see fit for the templates and what's being sent out to the ticket and everything like that.
Okay guys, that's everything I have for you today. Definitely check out the link below in the description of this video to get your free copy of the Power Automate template that I showed you as part of this tutorial. And comment below with any questions that you had about anything that I covered or how you're managing employee offboarding today. I'll see you guys in the next video.